What is going on, everybody? It's RedX here. Today bring you a very special VOD review of the first ever mobile duo to win FNCS in NA East, which is, as we all know, a very major region and where competition is very hard. That is Wilson and Larroy. They are the first mobile duos to do so, netting themselves 54 points along with one win, narrowing out the competition by only 1 point in order to win all of FNCS. They dropped staggering 29 eliminations, which is 10 more than second place, which shows really how well they played in terms of aggressiveness, and also shows a bit about the playstyle and how they prefer to play the games out. What we're watching right now is game 1, and a bit about Wilson and Larroy, a bit of background history. They land Misty Meadows. It's somewhere that they've managed to contest and become free. The only person scarcely around, the only duo scarcely around them is the other mobile duo, Invincible and Real. And in fact, they get such a large area free that they can get the fishing houses here and here. And they also get this area, and they can even push up here for some scraps of loot. But what's especially important about the henchman house is that they get heavy snipers, which such a great weapon in terms of refreshes, a very broken item overall, and it really helps to game out. Here we see them get a few plays done because of the heavy sniper, and it's great pressure. And if Larroy hit a few more snipes, who knows, they might have won even with an even more convincing lead. What getting Misty completely free entails for them is pretty broken loot, so they get all of this loot free. Obviously it's not like a mythic POI if you get that for free, such as say you got the shark for free, which may happen sometimes, may not happen sometimes. You get a launchpad guaranteed. There's no guarantee of a launchpad here in Misty, but Larroy did get a launchpad off of spawn, which is very helpful for the entire game, because that means a free rotate into any zone potentially if used correctly. So a bit of early game looting, it doesn't get any more interesting than this. And they just continue looting up this whole area out. They push into the Shadow Henchman house, and from there onwards they just go about the game normally. They get a few kills mid-game, which is quite interesting, and if we look at the battle map, they make their way over and they don't actually pull any of the zones. If we see, the zones keep going north of them, so they're stuck on the congested side if they don't make the early rotate, and because they have to get the henchman houses, the early rotate isn't much of an option if they want that power weapon inside of their inventory. So they opt to go for the henchman houses, and they make their way across all the way here, and they get stuck in a bit of a scuffle here during mid-game. We'll touch on that in the future. But zone is not friendly. They do not pull one major zone, and that's also something that lots of people struggle with. So watching NA East #1, they end up coming second in this particular game. I think it'd be very useful for us to see through what they did well, and also especially their mistakes. What we're about to watch right now is these two getting into a mid-game fight. Well, what actually happens in this mid-game fight is quite interesting, because they start off on the back foot, which is something that obviously lots of people struggle with to recover from. So they make their way down from the mountain. One thing that is kind of sketchy about this whole rotate, because they obviously have to rotate north from the zone unless they want to tank storm for whatever reason. And yes, they have floppers, but they want to save that for later. They don't really want to be tanking a storm from second zone onwards, because that already puts them at such a disadvantage. And if we take note right here, what's really kind of dodgy about this whole rotation is that from this point onwards, on the mountain, all the way down, when they make this rotate, all the way until roughly around here, Larroy does not look here, Larroy does not look here, Larroy does not look here, and especially to here, to the agency. If we look at the mini-map here, the agency is such a nice angle to get shots from. Into the storm surge, they don't even look left at this brown team, which ends up being the people who, you know, initiate the fight, this mid-game fight here. So if we watch it from Larroy's perspective, what actually ends up happening for him is he gets lasered. You know, he gets absolutely lasered by this team, and we can already see this team pushing. This team is already hungry for the kills, because if you break shield on the second person, the first person has to come back to assist them, and that you know, really lowers the gap. And because of the fact that the first person may be scared of making ballsy play, that's off general predictions and trends. They have the confidence enough to straight up push this fight, which it could work out well for them. But there are a few confusing factors. So once Larroy heals up, Wilson actively seeks out the opponent to try and apply a bit of pressure in order for Larroy to be able to actually, you know, heal up and have a bit of breathing. So Wilson realizes that Larroy gets lasered. You can hear the audio kill. Larroy definitely communicated that. Wilson just briefly saw Purify Pulse jump up, so he has a rough idea of where he's going to be. And notice this area is fully infested with bushes, and there's a really elegant flank from his teammate. If his teammate comes around here, that's a beautiful angle on Wilson if Wilson exposes himself. So they've set themselves up really nice for this fight. Look at how Wilson and Larroy are. They're compact, they're with each other, and Larroy's needing to heal up. They didn't capitalize on it quickly enough, which I think may be the deciding factor for a disengage, right? Because by this point they've got lots of tags. They've got roughly 100 damage worth of tags on Larroy. Maybe they trade a bit onto Wilson and they just leave onto zone, because the location of this fight is really, really bad. If we scroll out a bit, we find that what I talked about earlier about congested side stands true. Everybody here is trying to rotate onto this side of the zone, because that is as far as they'll be able to realistically go if they're still rotating now. If they start rotating now, that's as far as they'll go, because the people here, there'll probably be people set up here, all the way here. They'll just be holding them. So that's as far as they'll go, and everybody here in this whole area is kind of rotating into there. Everybody from this area, this one big arrow all the way here, white lining in. Not much else they can do, because if Wilson and Larroy, say from this position, they wanted to go around here, play perhaps that side on the side, not happening. 1, 2, 3 teams here that can get a laser off of them, and they might run into these people who are holding a bit and they're rotating there. Nobody wants to sacrifice their rotate, and if they can get free tags on their rotate, straight in on the easiest path possible, if they can get free tags and potentially a free kill, especially for Storm Surge. As we see, there's 90 people left in the zone, which when the warning comes out ends up becoming 87, which is still an insane amount. People are going to panic. So people like getting shots from here because A, they're on elevation, B, they're mid-rotate, C, these people are obviously pretty engaged already, and D, you know, power in numbers. Look how many of you are there. What are the chances that, you know, they manage to counter snipe or they manage to apply extra pressure back to you? None. And if you're at the back, especially, you know, if you're this team, or that team's slightly far away, but if you're this team and you're looking for tags, what are the chances that you get, you know, hit from the back? Well, yes, that can happen, since we see Apo and Velo coming in from zone, but generally it's quite a safe play. So this area where they take the fight is really bad, and what's crucial is they draw very little attention to it. So perhaps starting the fight or trying to move the fight into the house right next to it, that's one thing that they can do, or just finishing the fight quickly or disengaging. 3 options that are most safe and most orthodox. If you watch this fight play out, Wilson, you know, he looks and sees that this man is actually inside the bush. He manages to land a pretty good tag on him. Doesn't choose to build up onto height. Waits for Larroy to come next to him. And by this point, they have sights on player 2, which is played quite poorly by player 2, because he doesn't actually end up having any effect, right? He could have had this beautiful laser on Larroy. He could end up having this beautiful laser on Wilson. Doesn't happen. None of that actually happens because they timed this poorly. They timed this poorly, right? He gets super greedy with his C4. He ends up having to build his, you know, his shields only that much. He got, you know, bit down until he has the shield up. And what's even more interesting about this agency team, or this team that came from agency, is they don't have any shields. They don't have any shields, which is really strange for why they would push, because they don't have any shield heals. None. They only have white heals, and so they're getting a really desperate push down. And so by this point, they should be looking for the disengage already, but they don't, unwisely. So Larroy has his campfire here going on. He's just healing up a bit. What is super strange about this play is if we watch this go down in real time, what happened was this man jumps off of height, comes down right here, and look exactly what happens. He takes a balloon fight. Super poorly timed. What he actually intended to do was come out here and maybe trade a bit of damage, build, and have his teammate jump onto them. But his teammate doesn't go for a shot, his teammate ramps him off. So they, instead of actually having anything happen, or his teammate, you know, shooting Larroy, who is at the front and also cracked, bear that in mind, no shield, absolutely no shield. Instead of that happening, being very fluid, planned out movement, really good bait, nothing happens, Larroy wins the bloom fight, and they just chase him down. So they're obviously going to apply a bit of pressure. Wilson applies pressure whilst Larroy heals. His teammate legit just launches away. So his teammate's out of here. So that's how they actually made this rotate happen really smoothly. They might have gone stuck here because of all the factors that we talked about earlier in terms of this zone. But they do get pretty lucky on this. And Wilson hits Larroy for damage somehow. This interesting situation where they're stuck and there's people rotating in. They have a great position to hold because of that launch. And you see these people are probably aiming to come in and run here onto the side, avoiding the main congestion. But these people here, they kind of have to white line it. There's not much else for them to go. Maybe this team goes here. But this team right now is stuck in a very dangerous position of not being able to capitalize quickly enough on these people rotating in. And if they don't capitalize on them, and it's 87 people storm surge, they're going to die. Because once these people get in and they have enough damage, they're just going to box up wholly. They're just going to hold. They're going to like sit in a cone inside of a cone inside of a cone. And these people just absolutely make this team the center of focus, because everybody can see that this team is playing absolute edge, as far edge as you can, essentially. And they're the center of attention. They're the easiest place to hit for storm surge. There's people rotating in. And what Wilson and Larroy failed to do is to identify that this team is struggling with storm surge. These could have been 2 more free kills. So Wilson's like AFK, marking where in zone they probably want to go. Larroy is looking left and right for shots, but he's looking edge zone, which is something that we saw in Notify and Toxie. You see the whole concept of looking out to people who have to rotate into you or have to rotate by you. You see so many tags, so many opportunities for tags, and you know, potentially pick, especially since Storm Surge is about to become active in the zone, and they really want to capitalize off of that because they're so high above. There's 600 damage above the Storm Surge. There were 700 a minute ago as well. So, you know, Larroy is just being patient, sitting on his bike. But if you heard that audio cue just now, that very faint audio cue, you would have noticed that this team started getting hit by Storm Surge. And if I could hear it in replay mode, they could hear it in game. So that's a bit of awareness. But you should have heard that shield get hit, and it becomes really obvious that you're getting hit by Storm Surge at one point because of those constant shield cracks. And you see they get more desperate, and they're literally 1 box's distance away, right? This is the only box that separates these 2 teams. So if they can go down and they can secure these 2 eliminations, it's super easy on them. And if we look at what happens, not what, you know, Dino and Rez actually do, they did end up qualifying, but this game one was a bit rough for them. They're starting to get hit by Storm Surge, and it's noticeable, right? Because, you know, he gets 25 damage taken off every time, and this right here is the defining factor. They're so close to matching that threshold. They make these reckless peaks, and Wilson and Larroy, if they're looking in the right direction, Wilson should realistically be looking at this direction. if we look at it from this point of view, Wilson, he should be looking here, 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 because he's closest. Because Larroy can't really see this going down in real time because he's got Wilson's base as a barrier here. So he kind of breaks line of sight over here, but he does see him peek, and so do the other people in this lobby. And what ends up happening here is he makes this really reckless peek, gets triple dinked, and the moment after he gets triple dinked by this team with Org, I actually went back to check, he didn't get sniped. He gets hit by Storm Surge, and he just dies straight away because Storm Surge doesn't leave you alive or knocked. And so he gets really desperate, he pushes the team that Wilson has actually set up on. And by this point, realistically, Wilson should have noticed by now. So, this is a free kill, or these are free tags for the future. Right? So Wilson's right here. Dino is right here. One edit down, you've got a kill. It's a bit of lack of awareness that really cost them. Immediately, they should have looked to secure this cone here, this wall here, and they edit through and try to secure this area as well. There's a ton of stuff for them to secure, and this loot is super valuable to them. Look how much there was. That one launch pad can change their game if they didn't have one already, but having two is even better. Definitely having two is better. So this team secures it, and there's not much they can do about it. Now they've got to rotate, but they do come down for this. But I think Larroy didn't take the precaution to pre-wall off this, and he doesn't know what's on his back, so maybe a ramp covering it, or most preferably a wall, because a ramp makes it awkward. And if you have to edit a ramp against somebody's gunfire, against somebody bursting against you, it is pretty difficult. So comes down, gets the map. Yeah, as you can see, the ramp does get a bit difficult. It does get into the way. So that's a bit of mid-game awareness for you guys, using audio cues, looking for the signs of how players are playing differently in terms of their general aggression, in terms of how desperate they look, and how based up they are. This is discriminator essentially of people who, of what that side is. This is that side. There are 4 teams sharing this whole island, sharing this half of zone. Or 5 if you count these people who may rotate in here, but they could be playing absolutely that side. They could be coming around here. There's people who could be farming out this. And what separates Unreal and Invincible from Wilson and Larroy? They both ended up on 2 different sides of the zone, and strategically they're in a much better position in terms of rotating into the next zone, not being focused, etc. But they landed almost the same place. These people prioritize to rotate, right? So that might mean they struggle a bit with Storm Surge, but this team prioritized to rotate. Meanwhile, Wilson chose to go for that extra loot from the heavy sniper, and they went through all of that scuffle. They don't actively make their way into zone. That is fine. If you prefer congested zone, it's completely fine to play. But it is an advantage to maybe rotate earlier, be a bit less greedy. If you have a decent enough loadout, you can stick with it. So once again, as I was saying earlier, they don't pull zone again, and people around them. If we look at this pattern right now, everybody just rotated. The whole server just rotated in that 1 second. So that makes life so much easier for Wilson and Larroy, because they just take the rotates. They build a little bit. They rarely use any materials, and so it's defending themselves. That's a bit of lag from the replay file while it loads. But generally speaking, they're just chilling into zone. And Wilson and Larroy now, they're set up in zone. They don't use a lot of materials. And Storm Surge warning is 66 people, so that's 16 people that have to go. And here's a trend. Here's a trend that we see. Nobody playing center. This whole area is free real estate. You could be in hay bales for all of this time. Nobody will be looking at you because nobody's playing center, because everybody's so cheap and so shambles that they have to stop mid-game. They're not willing to risk going into center for better positioning, or to have a more dominant area to yourself, or having a larger area to yourself, because they're scared of getting lasered, and also because they're so shambles. So if you're a dead side player right now and you predict that the zone isn't going to come around your side, it's the perfect opportunity for you to just walk over. You can walk over based upon one of these mountains and be completely fine without using any materials. And being a dead side player, you haven't used many materials up onto that point anyways. They don't pull zone again. So they're stuck on congested side, they don't pull zone again, and instantly they decide, hey, we're going to launch. And here's a very good example of discipline, right? So Larroy, I think he probably hears the gunfire, he hears an audio cue, and he goes down, and we see him get a knock, but he doesn't get a finish. There's no finish on Wilson either, if we look back in the replays as well. There's a reason for that. They have one of the greatest disciplines I've seen in a while. If you look here, right, Larroy comes down, and by this point there's 28 seconds on Storm closing in. Comes down, and here's where he lands. Triple head dink. This team is just got annihilated within a second, so he's probably shouting in call right now. Wilson, right, I've knocked this guy. Wilson instinctively probably makes a call, chill, right. We're edge zone, we're at the back of zone, we have to make this rotate. And right now all they're focused on is just settling with breaking the lobby down, right? They're tearing the lobby apart bit by bit. And, you know, even when they have a heavy sniper and they know one of them's knocked and in a shambles, they don't go for it because it's not worth it. They're not going to sacrifice positioning and everything for that. And they launch pad, they do a low launch, because if they did a high launch, Isaac and his controller will absolutely laser them on height because they're the most obnoxious people. They're coming from the direction that is very clearly very full of people. And if you fly in directly like that, it's an easy horizontal track and everybody's going to be looking at you. Everybody in this tower will be looking at you. So what did they choose to do? They land just a bit outside the zone because that's as far as I'll get them. They commit a bit too many materials to my liking here. But Apo and Velo apply some pressure on them. But I think a pro of doing this whole thing, where you base them just outside of zone, to try and get some time off, to try and avoid the timing of your rotation of everybody's just rotating in at the same time, is that you end up landing yourself a very free rotate. Look at this. Everybody's already built for them because they waited that extra 20 seconds. You know, and the whole focus point, they're kind of playing dead side of alive, which is a strange concept. But this is the congestion and they're out of it. Right? Yes, generally speaking, they're, you know, this is the congestion, but they're on the dead side of the congestion. There's no term for it, but it is a thing to keep in mind. And they break line of sight by having that hill next to them, and Larroy rotates into Wilson. When we move into the endgame, we'll focus more on Larroy since he's, you know, more interesting than Wilson. Here's an interesting stacker as well. Wilson moves up, bases up. Larroy recognizes that this wall isn't actually theirs. This wall right here, so they can open up. And if they choose to open on Wilson, Wilson obviously knows because Larroy should calm this, so he might wall off himself. Larroy edits the ramp and gets a free shot onto here. It doesn't end up quite happening like so, but it is a good potential that people should start implementing. There's a little delay. You know, you could have heavy sniped it in, but they recognized it was solo and he dipped really quickly, which is really smart of him. If you're moving deeper into the endgame, we'll see this happen. There's a bit of server delay, but this is the one zone they pull. This zone is a blessing, because this zone kind of saved them. And, you know, Wilson tunnels up. This bit becomes really dangerous, because Wilson tunnels into somebody, and if that had gone on a different way, if Apostles wasn't already being pressured and completely clueless, Wilson's now trapped into a box. None of these walls are his, with somebody, and he can potentially get one pump, and Larroy's playing as a solo from this point onwards, and Wilson had 6 fish on him. That's a ridiculous amount to just give to an opponent, and luckily they don't. One thing that they need to work on more is staying together endgame. So they're kind of choking this point. Wilson makes the solo edit up, and Larroy stays down, and Larroy ends up running into an insane amount of people in zone, and he has really good endgame mechanics, which allows him to get away with that. But by this point onwards, their main focus is to come together in the zone. And there's that little bit of cause and effect for you. See, Larroy now has that zone play potential just because they split. And Wilson's actually, if we look here, Wilson is right above Larroy here. This is Wilson, and that's Larroy. So Larroy has a pretty clear path well, not pretty clear, but he has a relatively clear path up to try and get with Wilson, which isn't what he ends up doing. We don't actually know what ends up happening straight away because of the server replay lag, but by the end, they do come up together. It doesn't happen right away, but it happens pretty immediately that they get away with it. They're clearing out their inventory in terms of Slurpfish. He drops his heavy sniper for it, which is why we don't see any power weapon coming into play. And what's wrong with this now is that they're on a really bad layer. If we look here, this layer is horrendous, right? If zone went anywhere other than back, they would have a really hard time just struggling to get off of this layer, because it's so congested on low ground by this point. Look at the amount of people on low ground. If you're playing mid ground or height right now, you as long as you stay alive, you're chilling on placement points. So we should watch a bit of this congested low ground, which it is important, but this is a bit of using all of that noise pollution. So they know it's really stacked for low ground. They're able to, you know, break in without people noticing. They break and enter. They absolutely laser one person. Also has some pretty good strafes, and they try to secure the materials whilst Larroy heals up. They have a really good mats for 8th zone. It's 8th zone. It's a really slow zone. It's an infamously slow zone, and they still have that zone play potential from the two floppers. Larroy should probably split his minis by this point to Wilson, because the big pots are difficult to pop. And here's that bit of getting separated again. It's the same scenario essentially, and Wilson tunnels into somebody else, except this time they were ramp tunneling, and Wilson's where Apostles was just earlier. And because Larroy's not immediately with him, Wilson ends up dying. And once Larroy pressures him off away, he doesn't get the res off. He tries to stick it, brave of him, but because of his indecisiveness, he ends up not saving Wilson, and he randomly tanks zone for an insane amount of damage, and now he has to essentially use both his floppers just to get in. That's a nice build pattern that we'll identify in the future. It's super good for going upwards, and you know, it only requires 2-3 materials instead of, you know, a complicated build pattern that may require you to have more HP chunked off of you. But what's wrong with him right now is his layering. Because he went up so much and they were already kind of in mid ground. If we look at this, there's no low ground. This is something you see in West as well during 8th zone. There's like one guy low ground. You've got all of this congestion on mid ground, and there's basically no low ground going on. There's like one person on height, and there's super complicated mid ground congestion. And Larroy's essentially on like 2nd and 3rd height. He will get that pressure coming down to him very soon, so dropping down is the very obvious decision that he should do. He kind of tries to reclaim builds by this point, playing solo in duos right now. To the best of your ability, you want to play the front of zone. He probably wants to pop the flopper now by this point. By this point, he just realized, hey, it's about time. I won't be able to get a heal off for crazy zone play with this amount of congestion. There's still 9 people stacked into this zone. You've got to realize the concept of that. You've got to realize what actually that means, what that entails. 9 people in this zone means that every layer is super congested all the way leading up to height. And that's exactly what happens, right? The height team ends up winning because of the congestion, right? They don't have to do anything and they're already chilling. And Larroy has to dig through all of this, and it goes up. It actually goes up, which he luckily finds a decent opening. That happens. He comes up. He lands a really nice 100 attack, and this is the bit. This is Twitter. I want you guys to enjoy it in its full glory. Same build pattern again. Same build pattern. Comes up absolutely insane. This nice dip into zone kind of draws the attention off of him and allows him to catch them off guard. It's about being able to make zone plays even if you haven't got floppers. And that was so insane. That clutch there, not only did that clutch them the placement, that was what, 1, 2, 3, 4 kills. That's insane. That's why they were able to have so much momentum coming off of the first game. And the team on height, they just won because they kind of played it methodically, and Larroy doesn't hit every shot, and every shot isn't 200 for him. Thank you guys for joining me once again. Make sure you follow my Twitter, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube, make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys next time.